So as we dig into the nuts and bolts of how to update and maintain your website so it is ADA compliant, the first thing we're going to talk about is content hierarchy and patterns. Now, your site should be logical and obvious to use. People should not have to think to use your website. It's not like using your mother-in-law's microwave. It should be like, I know exactly how to use this. And you make that happen by having the correct content order, using heading order and sizing, and also using common web patterns so people don't have to think too hard about how to use your site. Now, some of this stuff is very black and white, and others of it is a big gray area. Some of it you can test for, others of it you can't test for. You just have to be able to know. The requirements that we're trying to meet in this lesson are making your website understandable, so it's predictable and easy to navigate. We also want to ensure that it maintains a meaningful sequence, so the reading and the navigation of your content should make sense, both visually and in the underlying code. And luckily, you are using WordPress, so the underlying code is written for you, and it will be in a logical order if you place it in a logical order. And last but not least, it needs to be navigable. So they should be able to find the content and determine where they are in the site easily. You need to have navigation that follows a logical order, headings and labels that describe their purpose clearly, and headings that organize your content. Now, some of this is our responsibility to you. We put the navigation on your site. We made sure that the links look like links. We've built a lot of these pages for you, and they're doing just these things. Now, as you add content to the pages, though, we understand that you weren't trained as designers nor web developers, but now you're being held to a standard to ensure that you are doing these things as well. So what are your responsibilities? First thing that you need to understand is how readers are getting through the order of the content on your page. And it is a gray area for sure. There's no automatic tool that can tell if your content is flowing in a logical order. You can test by tabbing through the links on a page. I can just click tab and it would take me to the next link on the page, which is way down here. But all that's doing is testing the order of my links. It does not test whether the information on the page is logically in order. So it's up to you to decide if the content makes sense. And when you put it on the page, you're going to use spacing, size, and design elements to help guide visitors through the page in a clear and logical way. So I want to look at this in an example really quick. First, we're going to look at not so obvious content order. I want you to read this content first, this second, this third, and this fourth. But because these two blocks are touching one another and they're both colored, I tend to jump from first to third and then over to fourth because it's bright pink and then up to second. But that's confusing to users because in English, we read from right to left, from top to bottom. So in design, we like to have a nice Z pattern. We like to have people come across, people come down, people come across, or else they're going to read in columns like you do in a newspaper, right? So we can fix this in a number of ways. You could put numbers next to each one of these paragraphs and headings, and that would be fine if you're presenting information that deserves numbers. Alternately, though, you can also just group them a little differently using some different design styles. When I put a dark box behind the first set of content and not around the second, I automatically start with the first and then go to the second set of content. When I put a background that goes around both the third and the fourth sets of content with a box around the third set of content, I automatically go from the third to the fourth set of content. So all of these types of styles are available to you inside of your admin section, and we've used them likely throughout your site already to show people logical reading order. But ultimately, I just wanted to show you this example to show you A, sometimes what we think is obvious is not obvious, and B, you can very easily use the tools within your admin section to allow you to organize the information in a logical fashion. So now that we have that big gray area out of the way, let's dig into a few black and white principles. So there are guidelines for the text that you use on your site. All of the text must be resizable. So if you can hold down the Control key and click the plus key while on your browser and everything gets bigger, it's all good. Your text is resizable. My text is resizable and it passes. Now, there are minimum sizing requirements also for the text, and we have already instituted these on all of the elements on your site. So you don't have to worry about them. If you're using the styles that we put in there for you, you're great. Now, you do have other ways that you can format content in your site. In even the basic paragraph and heading blocks, I have the ability to establish a number of styles on any type of text. I can change the size. I can change the size manually by typing in pixels. I can make it italics, bold, thin, thick. I mean, all kinds of different things. Uppercase, lowercase, underlined. All right, so that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of power, and we need to make sure that you're using all of your power for good. So as you are formatting text, avoid all caps, avoid tight letter spacing or very thin fonts. Also note that the small text size, you can see I put an X through it here, it might be too small on your site. And if it is and you would like to use it, just let us know and we will adjust it across the board for you so that way it is not too small. But a lot of the times by default, it is too small to meet compliance. We also want to avoid directional language. So you don't want to say that things are to the left of the picture or below the picture, because as the screen adapts on different devices, everything shifts and it might not be to the left or above or to the right anymore. So avoid directional language. Another very black and white area is the use of the default headings in your web pages. Now, these headings are supposed to establish that logical order in the page. And it has to look like it's in order, but then it also has to be programmatically in order, which is why we have to actually use the headings that are given to us inside of the admin section. Now, you need to use the headings physically in order. So you can go from heading 2 to heading 3 to heading 4, back to heading 2. That's perfectly fine. What you can't do is go from heading 2 to heading 4 because you skipped heading 3. That's not a logical order. You're not allowed to jump. You can only jump back multiple headings. Now, there is one heading 1 on every page. That's usually programmatically derived by the title of your page, and we have built that in for you. You don't get to put another heading 1 in. Even though you have the power to do it, you don't get to do it because it's non-compliant to have more than one heading 1. It's also non-compliant not to have a heading 1, so we need that in there. It's the most important information on the page. And we've already sized all your headings for you logically to be the largest as an H2, and then your H3s would be smaller, heading 4s would be smaller, and so on and so forth. The great news is that you have lots of built-in tools to make this super easy for you. We have preset all the styles for your headings so you can easily select heading 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, any of the ones that you want in your website at any given point in time just by clicking. You don't have to remember what they are, you just click. And if you're wondering what they look like, you can go out to your website, go to your site URL /assets, and every site that we build has a page that looks just like this, and it outlines the sizing of all of the styles on the site. So you can go in, you can look at this page, and you can learn exactly what they look like and use it as a guide to help you style your pages. Now, when we jump into the admin section, you can see that if I select any of my headings, it tells me what heading size it is. And if I click here, it shows me the different heading sizes that I have available. I can still edit them, but also I should be using this really consistent styling method here. Now, I do understand I am a designer, so I 100% understand that you don't always want everything to look exactly the way it looks, right? But you do have to maintain that consistent leveling from 2, 3, 4 in the same order to meet Google's needs and to meet ADA compliance. So every website that we build has advanced styles built into it, so that way you can make any heading or any text look like any other heading or text. So the way that you do that is in your admin section. You can put your cursor in any heading or any text block, and then you can go down into the advanced pane, open it up, and then you can type in whatever you want it to look like, whichever heading style you want right there. And then, as you can see, it just changed on my screen. So in this way, you can have headings that this is an H3, but it's styled as an H5 because I want it to be smaller. And it still meets compliance. It still meets Google's qualifications, but it looks the way I want it to look. So there you go. You have even more power than you ever thought you had. Now, as I'm going through and I'm styling a page, sometimes I forget. I'm not sure what font is what. I'm not sure what color is what. So I like to use What Font Chrome extension to figure that out. I'll show you how it works. All I do is I click this little F at the top of my screen, and then anywhere I place my cursor, it tells me the font family, the style, the weight, the color, all of it, right? So you can use this to help you decode what's going on in your site if you don't want to have to go back to that assets page and click all over inside of it. I use this tool all the time. And then you just click, and then it turns off. Now, at the top of the lesson, when we were reading the requirements, a lot of them talked about navigation. And navigation on a website is more than just the stuff at the top of the page. It's also any link within the site. So the links within your site also need to be logical and obvious. They need to look and act like links, meaning you can't have text on the page that's underlined. It's not a link because it feels like a link, but it's not, right? You also have to have a noticeable contrast between your links and your text. They have to be obvious. You should have your links indicated by more than just color. So some people don't do this. I always suggest that they do. At least have a hover state on your link where it underlines when you roll over it. So that way, if someone can't see a very good contrast between the links and the text, they can at least hover over it and see that it's an active link. I don't suggest bolding links as a hover state because it moves the content around it, and that cannot feel very good to some users who might be prone to seizures and they don't need to have moving content around them. Also, your link should behave as expected. So for example, PDF should open in new tabs, navigation links should take you somewhere on the site. So just make sure that you're following these trends that you probably haven't even noticed happen. They're everywhere, right? And when it doesn't act normal, you're like, what's wrong? That seems weird. Now imagine if you couldn't reason that well, or if you didn't have the ability to use your computer quite the same way. It would feel even worse. And that's what we're trying to guard against for people who are using screen readers or other ways to navigate your site. So your link text must also be descriptive. This is especially important for screen readers because screen readers read the text that is the link, right? So a good link would say, view our annual report, not click here. Because click here doesn't describe where it's going. Just like read more, learn more, they also don't describe where they're going. So instead, you can say contact our team or donate to the program, anything that explains to them where they're going. And once again, in our links as well, we want to avoid the directional language. We don't want to describe a link to the left or below because as screen sizes adapt, the location of the elements shift. So before we get to testing this information, I want to go over just a few obvious yet not so obvious patterns to build by. Now, this is like Design 101, and I know that you're not all designers, and so I do see these things often, but man, my design teacher would just be melting down on me if I did them, so I'm going to share them with you. These are some rules to live by. One is when everything is bold, nothing is bold, so don't make everything bold. When everything is italics, nothing is italic anymore, so don't make everything italic. All caps feels like you're yelling at someone. But also, when we read, we recognize shapes of words. That's how kids learn to read. That's how all of us read. That's how we read quickly instead of sounding out every letter. When you convert all of the letters in a word to uppercase letters, you take away the word recognition shape. It becomes a box. It becomes a rectangle. So it's not as easy to scan. I suggest that if you want to use all uppercase letters, only do it for very short titles, nothing over say 5 words. Once it gets over 5 words, it's just too much and you can't read it quickly anymore. You're doing a disservice to your visitors. So you're going to use consistent button, list, and heading formatting instead of flipping all over the place. Also note that centering text, like lots of text, especially in a wide area, makes it more difficult to read. It's easier to read left-aligned text because your eye knows exactly how to go to the side of the page and read it. It has an edge, right? Also, running text farther than 1,200 pixels wide on a site makes it more difficult to read. And it's for the same reason as the left-aligned versus center-aligned text. When you're following a line of text all the way across the screen, it's hard to know where the next line starts. Instead, you can pull the margins in and make the text narrower, so that way it's easier to read. That's why a lot of blogs are narrow, right? And this wasn't a problem back in the day when we had little monitors, but now we have huge monitors, so it's not as easy to read. Also, if you have really huge headings, they can get hard to read as well. It can feel like just a wall of text because it's such big words. So make sure that you're sizing things appropriately based on how long they are. And last but not least, really tiny text is also not ADA compliant and nearly illegible half the time. So there you go. Design rules to live by. These are listed as things that you should not do to meet ADA compliance, but they're also just really good design practices as you're putting your content together. And it doesn't matter if it's a PDF or it's a web page, all of these rules apply. So once you have your whole page put together, it's time to check your work. And to check your work, I suggest using Wave Chrome extension. It's free and it will assess any errors that it sees on your page. Now, as we said before, not everything is going to get caught in this test. The tests don't catch everything, ever, because they're not smart enough to do that. That's why you're sitting in this lesson and listening to me talk, right? So let's see how this works. On this page, all I have to do is click my browser extension. So after you click on your Wave Chrome extension, Wave will go through and quickly scan the page and deliver a report on the left side of the page of what it's seeing on your website. It labels all the elements that it recognizes inside the site, and some of these should be really recognizable to you after going through this lesson. Here's the H1, here's the H2, here's the H3. It also identifies things that could be H tags but aren't. Like I styled these as an H6, but I didn't actually make them H6s. So it says, did you mean to do that? I'm not sure. Now, if you want to have more details, you can click on the Details tab and it will outline all of the items that it sees that it thinks are not quite right on the page. So, for example, up at the top, it has 3 errors. If you can't figure out what they mean, that's what we're here for. These types of things, you let us know and we will help you with them, okay? Contrast errors, we will actually be going over these in the next lesson when we talk about colors and contrast. And then these alerts are talking about skip heading levels, possible headings, redundant links. We talked about all of those things in this lesson. Now, if I'm not sure about them, all I have to do is click and it'll take me down to them. So here is the skipped heading level. It goes from H2 to H4. This is great because I know that my heading levels have to be in the right order to meet compliance. And this has flagged a skipped heading level. So now I need to go back into the page and make this into an H3 styled as an H4 so that way it meets compliance. Now our other alerts like long alternative text, those things, we'll be talking about those in another lesson, and I'll help you learn how to decide whether or not it actually is too long or whether it's absolutely appropriate for the image that you have, because this is another one of those gray areas where you get to decide. So whether or not you're doing a simple update or something fancy, the content on your page still needs to be logical and obvious for users to use. It needs to be understandable, have a meaningful sequence, and be easily navigable. And we do those things by making sure our content is in the right order, by using heading order and sizing to show appropriate hierarchy of content, and using established web patterns, especially in the way that we use our links inside of our pages to make sure that people can navigate through the site and get their information easily, clearly, without thinking. Next up, we're going to talk all about colors.